In 1995, one of the greatest teams in all of sports history was about to show the world what they're made of. I'm talking about the 1995 to 96 Chicago Bulls. They didn't just win. They became the standard. 72 wins, a championship, a season so dominant that people still talk about it decades later. But what made that team world-class wasn't just Michael Jordan's greatness. It was Scottie Pippen's versatility. It was Dennis Rodman's relentless rebounding. As Phil Jackson, the coach, famously said, the strength of the team is each individual member, and the strength of each member is the team. That Bulls team proved that greatness is never built on talent alone. It's built when the right people commit to something bigger than themselves. And at the heart of every great team is leadership. You know, I've been a student of leadership for a long time now. My leadership journey started about 15 years ago when I was really young and I had no idea what I was doing. And now I lead a team of a little over 50 staff and volunteers. And so naturally, I've spent a lot of time studying how this works. Like, how do you pull this off? Not only for my own benefit as a practitioner, but also because I find the topic just absolutely fascinating. Behind every story of greatness, there's leadership. Whether it's the innovative teamwork behind Pixar's storytelling, or the world-renowned music of the Beatles, or the 1980 US Olympics Miracle on Ice team, or the dedicated collaboration behind the NASA's 1969 Apollo 11 mission, the Manhattan Project, America's founding fathers, the British War Cabinet, or Lincoln's famous team of rivals, the greatest moments and accomplishments in history have been the result of great teams led by great leaders. There's something truly phenomenal about how a team operates, as in it can quite literally go beyond what you think is possible. For instance, you may be familiar with the classic oxen example. A single ox can pull about 5,000 pounds. Now, how much do you imagine two oxen yoked together can pull? Well, if one can pull 5,000, you'd probably assume 10,000 pounds, right? That's wrong. Two oxen can actually pull up to 15,000 pounds. It doesn't add up, does it? But that's the phenomenon that we see all the time with teams. It's not addition, it's multiplication. With the right leadership, teams can pull way more weight than you might think is possible. Now, I've been a pastor for a little over a decade, and I believe this is actually far deeper than just some surface level concept. Now, you may not be a person of faith, and that's totally fine, but I do think you should eavesdrop on some of the teaching that the Bible gives us on this, because it really is so applicable to leadership. You might be familiar with the old proverb that says, two people are better off than one, for they can help each other succeed. If one person falls, the other can reach out and help. Three are even better, for a triple braided cord is not easily broken. There's so much wisdom in that. You know, if you've spent any time at all studying the life and the ministry of Jesus, then you'll get an absolute masterclass on how to lead people. He had his famous inner circle of disciples that he spent a lot of time investing in, a lot of time mentoring. And that team went on to build the early church, which again, if you've ever studied that whole era, the early church was explosive in growth. It's like nothing we've ever seen. And it took an enormous amount of leadership training from Jesus himself to help them pull that off. Now, over the years, as I've continued to research this stuff, the leadership principles become just overwhelmingly clear. The leadership framework is unmistakable. Three things keep rising to the surface. Three qualities just keep showing up. I'm talking about three major pillars of leadership that the greatest leaders in history have held to. And here's the cool thing. This is a playbook you can take and run with. I'm going to show this to you right now because, again, I think it's fascinating. If you're serious about leadership, then you're going to love this. This is really going to help you as you develop yourself as a leader or as you shape your current leadership role. Let's dive into it. Here's pillar number one, and I'm calling this one, what are you fighting for? November 19th, 1863, Abraham Lincoln stood before a divided nation in desperate need of leadership. I mean, what could a leader say in the midst of such a great and heartbreaking civil war? What words could cut through the hate and the hurt and bring restoration? Lincoln did what I feel is so profound. He went to the very grounds where the Battle of Gettysburg was fought just 4 months earlier, the same grounds where roughly 8,000 soldiers lost their lives. Lincoln spoke these famous words. He said, 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. That opening line alone reflects just how great a leader Lincoln really was. With all of his wisdom, in the greatest hour of need, he brought the nation back to the mission. This is why we're here. This is what we're fighting for. Now, fast forward 100 years, and another great leader stood before that same divided nation and reminded them yet again of what they stand for. He said, I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up to live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. People forget the mission, don't they? They stop seeing the vision. They lose sight of their purpose and their role. They forget what they stand for. A leader stands before those people and reminds them. You may be familiar with the story of Moses in the Bible. God tells Moses to go free his people, the slaves that were in Egypt. And Moses obeys. A lot of people don't fully understand how massive a historical event this really was. Some scholars estimate that it could have been anywhere from 2.5 to 3 million Israelite slaves at that time in Egypt. I mean, a massive percentage of that population. It would have been this absolute economic tidal wave of unthinkable proportions. I mean, imagine if all of a sudden all of the workers filling the roles in New York City just decided to up and leave. I mean, that's kind of like the weight and gravity of this. Without getting into all the details, the story goes that God helped Moses free the entire Israelite people through just a series of miraculous events. And it was one of the most incredible moments in all of human history. And after witnessing how God moved in all of that, the Israelite people became fully convinced and completely united under God, pledging their undivided commitment to his vision for their lives. Well, the story doesn't really end there. 40 years after the liberation from Egypt, that unity starts to take a turn. Division and doubt begin to creep into the Israelite people. And so what does Moses do as the leader? He stands before the people and he carefully and he methodically reminds them of everything God did for them. He riddles off story after story after story of how God showed up time and again. He brings the people's focus right back to the mission. This is why we're here. This is our purpose. The greatest leaders start with the mission and they never let people forget it. This is the first pillar a leader establishes. Let's look at the second one. Pillar number 2. I'm calling this one improve the experience. The history of transportation in America is fascinating. For many centuries, transportation depended mainly on wind, water, animals, human strength. And this changed dramatically during the Industrial Revolution in the 18th and 19th centuries. Steam engines started to power trains and ships, and it just made travel and trade just faster and more reliable, and it was great. It's great innovation. And then in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the automobile began to transform personal transportation. But while cars were obviously an amazing innovation, there was still a problem. They were too expensive. A lot of people don't realize that one of the greatest innovations in the history of transportation wasn't a vehicle at all. It was how vehicles were made. In 1913, Henry Ford and his team at the Ford Motor Company famously developed and popularized the modern moving assembly line. In addition to my F-150, I want to thank Ford for this because this is huge. Ford wanted to solve a major problem. Cars were too expensive and they took too long to build. And his goal was to make the Model T affordable for ordinary families, not just the wealthy. That was his mission. And so Ford's team redesigned manufacturing so that each worker performed a specific task as the product moved down the line. Instead of workers moving from car to car, the car came to them. This was huge because it dramatically reduced production time. It lowered costs and it made mass production possible on a scale that the world had never seen before. And the impact went far beyond the factory floor. Products became more affordable, industries expanded, modern manufacturing took shape. It proved that when people work within a shared system toward a common goal, they can create extraordinary progress. You see, it didn't just change how cars were built. It changed what we previously thought was possible. And it all starts with Ford's mission. He had a mission to revolutionize the transportation industry, and he understood that he needed to improve the overall experience to see that become a reality. Now, by experience, I'm referring to things like processes, systems, strategies, but I'm also referring to things like creativity and technology and innovation and imagination and so on. If the mission is the why, then the experience is the how. Great leaders are constantly improving how they pursue the mission. They're constantly adapting and innovating. They're faithful to the mission, but they're ruthless with the methodology. The mission never changes, but the methods of achieving that mission are constantly changing. That's pillar number 2. Let's look at the next pillar. Pillar number 3, I call fight off the wolves. My wife and I love watching this show called Farming Life. We found it a few years ago, and it just follows farmers in the UK, and it's just this delightful aesthetic, and it's fascinating to see how they manage their work. I particularly like watching the shepherds. You know, I always viewed shepherds as like old time kind of thing, but modern shepherds are really interesting. They've got it down to an art form. Sheep are obviously incredibly idiotic and they're incredibly frustrating, but these shepherds just know how to lead them. They know how to handle them. I'm sitting there thinking, man, the correlation between that and leadership is just so strong. These days, they have all sorts of tools to help. But in the old days, or maybe I should say the ancient times, shepherds had a very simple tool. You probably know what I'm talking about. It's called a shepherd's crook. And it's what I think most people imagine when they think of a shepherd. More or less, it's just this long staff with a hook at the end. But this simple tool was incredibly helpful. The hook, for instance, was perfect for catching livestock that were trying to run away or go a different direction. It was also perfect for rescuing livestock if they fell into a hard-to-get place. It was helpful for navigation, for parting thick undergrowth. And it was also a great walking stick in rough terrain. But another reason, if not the main reason, that shepherds needed their shepherd's crook was in case any predators came sniffing around. At the end of the day, the shepherd was there to protect the sheep. You know, I mentioned that the life and teaching of Jesus was just such a masterclass on leadership. Jesus actually brought up this very illustration a lot, actually. He says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd gives his life for the sheep. I so wish that I had time to break down the full significance of that, but here's the headline that I want you to take away. A true leader dies to themselves to fight off the wolves. You know, in the world of business, they might call this protecting the culture. And that's fine. I talk about culture all the time on this channel. But truthfully, it's so much bigger and deeper than that. This is all about sacrifice. It's all about selflessness. It's all about leading from a place that's willing to risk it all for the mission. The leader believes in the mission so much that they're willing to lay down their life to protect it. Now, if you're thinking, that's kind of intense, well, what's your mission? What are you fighting for? Or a better question might be, is your mission worth fighting for? If not, man, your mission sucks. Find a better one. You need a mission so great that you're willing to lay it all on the line to fight off the wolves. And I think you already intuitively know what those wolves are, don't you? It's the division and the hate. It's the lies and deception. It's the conflict and the passive aggression. It's the gossip and the slander. It's the selfishness and the ego. It's the fear and the doubt. It's all the things that undermine your chances of fulfilling the mission. What does a leader do? A leader steps in front of the enemy and stands ready to beat the living snot out of the wolves if they come around. And yes, a leader can expect to take some hits and hurts in that process, but the mission is worth it. But there's still one problem that we haven't even touched on. It might be a problem you're already thinking about. Understanding what the 3 pillars are doesn't mean you know how to walk through them. You might have questions already like, okay, how do I cast vision? How do I bring people back to the mission? What kind of methods do I need to reassess and change to improve the experience? How do I, practically speaking, beat off the wolves that I'm currently facing? Those are exactly the kinds of questions that you should be asking and be thinking about. And in fact, I actually get into all of that in a very tactical way in this video that should pop up right here. I'll also put a link in the description for you, but I break it all down. I'm cheering you on, and I'm also praying for you. Pray over this community every day. As always, keep fighting the good fight, and I'll see you over here in this next video.